When you ask most people who the greatest driver of all time is, and if they have some Formula One knowledge, they'll most likely say Michael Schumacher. On the 3rd of January 1969, in Hürth, Germany, a little boy is born that they named Michael. Michael's parents were in the working class, so they weren't rich whatsoever. When Michael turns 4 years old, his father buys a chassis that's supposed to be for a go-kart, and he puts an old motorcycle engine on it so Michael can start driving with it. When young Michael got behind the wheel, you could tell he was someone special, because he was driving way better than the older kids. And his father figured that out early on as well, so he took karting very seriously for his son. And that's why he started competing in actual races. When 4-year-old Michael Schumacher entered these tournaments, his opponents were much older than him, older than 10 years old, and he was the only little guy there, but he would embarrass them. And in only 2 years, when he gets to 6 years old, Michael becomes the karting champion of his town. And this is while his opponents were between the ages of 12 and 15, and he was the only 6-year-old. Even though Michael was extremely successful in this sport, but it was very expensive for his parents, and they couldn't afford it properly. It wasn't in a position where they could get sponsorships either. This is why not only his mother got an extra job to pay for this hobby, his father started fixing karts for other kids to get an extra income on the side, so Michael could continue on racing. You could say his parents truly believed in Michael, because they knew eventually he's going to be very successful in this sport, which is why they sacrificed everything for him. And this is how Michael Schumacher continued his karting career until the age of 19. And he won championship after championship throughout Western Germany. Because of his talent in driving, when he was only 19 years old, he entered Formula 3 racing. It is true that Formula 3 is not Formula 1, but for a young 19-year-old boy, it's amazing, and it's a huge stepping stone, and you could tell he's in the right direction. This is when actual sponsors and Formula 1 teams started to take a look at Michael Schumacher, because he was a special kid amongst other drivers. In only 2 years of driving in Formula 3, Michael Schumacher became the champion of this division, and it was because of this championship that he was allowed to enter Formula 1, but that was because they needed a backup driver. After entering Formula 1, Benetton Formula 1 racing team contacted Michael to be one of their main drivers. And since Michael Schumacher is only 21 years old, he's starstruck, and obviously he accepts the deal and becomes one of their drivers. It didn't take long for Michael Schumacher to show how great of a driver he is, because in the years 1994 and 1995, consecutively, he won the championships for the Formula 1 races, and this is when he went global. The amazing part is that Michael Schumacher is only 25 years old at this time, and the other drivers are much more older and experienced than him, so it was amazing that some 25-year-old is beating these OGs. After all this success, when we get to the year in 1996, Ferrari Formula 1 team contacts Michael Schumacher to be one of their drivers. In the early stages of racing for Ferrari, Michael Schumacher got somewhat unlucky. A few accidents here and there, and one of them was so bad that he broke his legs, so he couldn't drive for months. When we get to the new century, meaning the year 2000, Michael Schumacher is locked and ready to show the world that he's the greatest driver of all time. And he really does it, because he wins 5 consecutive championships in Formula 1, which is the highest record in Formula 1 history, which he holds to this day. It is the year 2025, and no Formula 1 driver has become champion 5 times consecutively. And this is one of the main reasons that Schumacher is known as one of the greatest drivers of all time. And in his prime, he was making $100 million a year, which made him the highest paid athlete at his time. In this era, not even the greatest football players would get this kind of salary. Schumacher was a philanthropist himself as well. Any tragedy that would happen around the globe, he would be the first to donate money to the cause. Like for example, in the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, he donated $10 million to UNESCO to help the people of Southeast Asia. And I don't know what UNESCO did, they probably took all the money for themselves. But obviously we don't know that, that was a joke. Eventually we get to the year 2006. Michael Schumacher is pretty much past his prime now, and he announces his retirement. He retires, but he stays in the Ferrari team as a test driver. So he would just test the Formula 1 cars rather than actually compete in the races. Because if you want to compete in Formula 1, you truly have to be a young athlete. And when you get upper in the ages, you cannot compete with the young folks anymore. And Michael Schumacher knew this. Of course, there are some athletes that are going after 40 years old, but that's very rare. But these companies didn't let Michael Schumacher enjoy his retirement. Because when we get to the year 2009, when Schumacher is 40 years old, the Mercedes Formula 1 team invites him over to be one of their main drivers. And since the payout was so insane, Michael couldn't say no to it, so he decided to race once again. But unfortunately, he was 40 years old at this time and he couldn't compete with the other drivers. So you could say it kinda damaged his career to race for Mercedes. In a way, he retired in 2006 in his prime, and it should have stayed that way. But Mercedes kinda ruined his retirement. But after 3 years of racing for Mercedes and not being that successful, he retired in 2012 forever. When he's retiring this time around, his net worth is more than $1 billion. And finally, after many years of competing, he can finally get to spend some time with his family and use some of this money. About 1 year into his retirement, meaning at the end of the year 2013, Michael and his family go to the French Alps to ski with some of their friends. His friends had brought their kids along as well, and Michael was teaching them how to ski. But all of a sudden when they're skiing, Michael sees one of his friend's kids fall pretty badly, so which is why he tries to take a shortcut to help the kid out. But unfortunately, he wasn't familiar with the path he was taking, because he has taken a path where there's a bunch of rocks, and since he's going very fast, he falls down pretty badly and hits his head on one of the big rocks laying there. Even though he had a helmet on, his brain suffered a huge hit. And of course, he gets knocked out because of this insane hit. Experts say if Michael Schumacher wasn't wearing a helmet in this accident, he would have been dead right on the spot. But this helmet saved his life. After this accident takes place, his family and friends come over. They immediately call an ambulance and a helicopter shows up to take Michael to the closest by hospital. In the hospital, his family and friends are confronted with some terrible news. The hit that Michael has experienced in this accident was so severe that doctors didn't know what to do, which is why they suggested to keep him in a coma to see what is happening before we can make a decision on what to do. There were many problems with the brain at this time. There was internal bleeding, bruising, and this was all causing the brain to swell. And this is why the doctors had no idea what to do, which is why the decision was made to keep him in a coma until they can figure it out. After this accident took place, the news came out that Michael Schumacher experienced a terrible ski accident, but no other news came out after this, and we truly couldn't know what is up with Michael Schumacher, one of our heroes. It was kind of like he had already passed on. That's how little news was coming out. But of course, he wasn't passed on. His family just wanted to keep his condition private and didn't want anyone to know. They were very strict on no reporters to be around him. And that's one of the main reasons after this skiing accident, there has been no public photos of Michael whatsoever. If there are any photos, it's a private collection that belongs to the family. But some news eventually came out that 2 surgeries were done on his brain, and they were somewhat successful, so they were allowed to pulling out of the coma. But unfortunately, there are no good news, because Michael could not speak at this time or walk. The last news that came out about Michael Schumacher's life was about his daughter's wedding a few months ago, and there are some spectators that say he was there, but of course no photos were taken of him. This was a sad life story of a man that was a champion from age 4 all the way to age 43. Basically, he spent his entire 40 years in the racetrack, but the second he retired to enjoy it with his family, he experienced something this tragic. Life is extremely weird. What do you guys think?